Stacy Monroe's fingers closed around Sungmin Park's wrist, just as the Mont Blanc pen touched paper. "Don't sign that," she whispered, her grip tightening as his security team shifted toward her. "The ink is poisoned. You'll absorb it through your skin. Dead in 90 seconds. 11 p.m. on a Thursday, and the Lotus Room's private dining area smelled like aged whiskey, and the particular scent of money so old it had stopped trying to prove anything. Cedarwood, maybe. Or leather worn soft with age, or the specific musk that clung to men who owned cities instead of living in them, who moved through the world like gravity bent differently around their bodies. Stacy had been refilling water glasses, invisible as wallpaper when she'd seen it. The way James Chen, silver-haired, 60-something, impeccably suited, had handled the pen before sliding it across the table. The slight hesitation. The way his fingers had avoided the barrel. The microscopic shimmer on the metal surface that caught the chandelier light wrong. Sungmin Park sat absolutely still beneath her touch. At 38, he carried himself with the kind of preternatural calm that made noise feel like a threat. His jaw was sharp enough to cut glass, all angles and clean lines that suggested genetics and probably a childhood where weakness was cold early. Dark eyes that reflected light without seeming to absorb it, as if even photons knew better than to linger. His suit was bespoke. She could tell by the way it moved with him rather than against him, by the way the fabric draped his shoulders, like it had been grown there. Men like him, men whose names made other men lower their voices and check exits, men who carried violence like tailored suits, rarely acknowledged service staff. She'd learned that in her first month at the Lotus Room. Had learned to read the micro-expressions that telegraphed mood and danger, had learned which patrons were simply wealthy and which ones were dangerous, had learned the difference between power that was inherited and power that was taken with blood and maintained with fear. His dark eyes locked onto hers, not looking through her anymore, but at her, really seeing her for the first time. Cold, calculating, promising violence for the insolence of touching him without permission. "Explain," he said quietly, his voice like smoke over broken glass, "why a waitress knows about contact poisons." 3 security guards surrounded her now. She could see them in her peripheral vision, hands moving toward weapons concealed beneath expensive suits. The closest one, broad-shouldered with scars mapping his knuckles, had his hand inside his jacket. 2 seconds from drawing, maybe less. Stacy didn't flinch, didn't let go of his wrist. The pen was still in his hand, still hovering over the merger contract that would legitimize his shipping empire or end his life. "Because 3 years ago," she said, her voice pitched low enough that only he and Chen could hear, "I was the forensic chemist who testified against the Vittorio family. The same family your business partner across this table used to work for before they collapsed." The man across the table, James Chen, potential investor, supposedly clean money from Singapore, stopped smiling. The warmth drained from his expression like water down a sink, replaced by something cold and calculating and absolutely murderous. "Fascinating story," Chen said smoothly, but his hand had moved beneath the table. "But I think the lady has watched too many movies. Please, Mr. Park, sign so we can toast to our partnership." Sungmin's gaze never left Stacy's face. She could feel him processing, calculating, deciding whether to believe a ghost or become one. His pulse jumped beneath her fingers, just once, barely perceptible, but there, human, alive, deciding. "Which poison?" he asked. "Ricin derivative, modified for transdermal absorption." The words came out steady despite her heart trying to break free from her ribs. "The pen barrel has a pressure release chamber. The moment you press down to sign, capillary action draws it into the ink reservoir. You'd write your own death sentence. Literally." She watched his eyes shift, just slightly, examining the pen without moving his head, looking for confirmation of what she'd said. The barrel did have a seam, hairline thin, almost invisible, exactly where a pressure chamber would be installed. "How do you know this?" Sungmin asked. Stacy swallowed hard. This was the part that would either save her life or end it. "Because I helped design the delivery system. Before I testified, before I destroyed the family that funded the research." The security guard closest to her spoke in rapid Korean. She caught maybe 1 word in 3. Her Korean was conversational at best, learned from 6 months of language apps and eavesdropping on the Lotus Room's Korean clientele. But she understood tone. He was asking permission to remove her. Permanently. Sungmin raised one hand, a single gesture that commanded absolute stillness. Everyone in the room froze. Even Chen, who'd been slowly rising from his chair, settled back down. "Mr. Chen," Sungmin said, his voice pleasant, conversational, which somehow made it more terrifying. "Would you mind if I had my security team examine this pen, just to ease everyone's concerns?" "Of course not," Chen replied, but sweat had begun to bead at his temples. "Though I must say, this is highly unusual. The pen was a gift from my personal collection. I'm somewhat offended by the implication." "Then you won't mind the examination," Sungmin interrupted gently. He set the pen down on the table with delicate precision, as if it were a live grenade. Then his hand moved from where Stacy still gripped his wrist to cover her fingers with his own. His touch was warm, calloused in ways that suggested he didn't just order violence, but participated in it. "Don't let go," he murmured, so quietly she almost missed it. "If you're lying, you die. If you're telling the truth, you just saved my life and made yourself the most valuable person in this room. Either way, you stay exactly where you are." One of his men, the broad-shouldered one with scarred knuckles, produced a small device from his jacket, something that looked like a pen-sized scanner. He approached the Mont Blanc carefully, keeping his own hands gloved as he picked it up. The scanner beeped once, twice, then emitted a sustained tone that made everyone in the room tense. "Positive for ricin compounds," the guard said in English, his accent thick but clear. "Pressure chamber detected. She's right, Hing-Nim. You sign that, you're dead in 2 minutes." The silence that followed had weight, texture, physical presence. Stacy could feel Sungmin's focus shift, could feel the exact moment he stopped seeing her as a potential threat and started seeing her as something else entirely. An asset, a weapon, a variable that had just changed everything. Chen moved fast, faster than a 60-year-old man should move. His hand came up from beneath the table, holding a compact pistol, the kind that was easy to conceal and devastating at close range. But Sungmin moved faster. His free hand, the one not covering Stacy's on his wrist, swept the heavy contract binder off the table directly into Chen's face. The impact was solid, meaty, the sound of expensive paper and leather connecting with nose cartilage. Chen's shot went wide, punching into the silk wallpaper 6 inches from Stacy's head. Then Sungmin's security erupted into coordinated violence. The scarred guard put 2 rounds into Chen's shoulder before the man could aim again. Another guard swept Stacy and Sungmin both to the floor, his body covering theirs as more gunfire erupted from the corridor outside. Chen hadn't come alone. He'd brought backup. Stacy found herself pressed against Sungmin's chest, his heart hammering against his ribs, his arms wrapped around her head protectively. The floor was cold marble beneath her cheek. Glass shattered somewhere. Someone screamed, the sharp crack of gunfire mixed with shouted Korean and the meaty sound of impacts. "How many?" Sungmin asked, his voice absolutely calm despite the chaos. 4 in the corridor, the guard above them reported. 2 more covering the service entrance. Minho is handling them. "The woman," Sungmin said, and Stacy realized with a start that he meant her. "She comes with us. No arguments." "Boss, she's a civilian. She saw the poison. She recognized the delivery system. She grabbed my wrist instead of running." His arms tightened fractionally around her. "She's either the smartest person in this building, or she's been sent to infiltrate, and either way, I'm not letting her out of my sight until I know which." The gunfire stopped as suddenly as it had started. Eerie silence fell, broken only by someone's labored breathing and the distant sound of sirens. "Police." Someone had called the police. "We need to move now," the guard said urgently. "NYPD will be here in 3 minutes." Sungmin pulled Stacy to her feet with him, his hand still locked around her wrist where she'd first grabbed him. The touch had reversed. Now he was holding her, not letting go, his grip firm but not painful. "What's your real name?" he asked as his men hustled them toward a service exit she hadn't known existed. "Stacy Monroe," she said, stumbling slightly in her waitress flats as they moved. "And before you ask, yes, I'm the auditor, the one who destroyed the Vittorio family, the one with a $3 million bounty, the one who's supposed to be dead." His eyes searched hers for deception, for madness, for any reason to dismiss what she'd just said. She held his gaze steadily. Let him see the truth written in her expression. "Welcome back to the world, Miss Monroe," he said quietly as they disappeared into the service corridor, leaving behind the bodies and the broken glass and the poisoned pen that would have killed him. "Let's make sure you survive it this time." The safe house in Queens looked like abandonment given architectural form. Cracked concrete steps leading to a door that sagged in its frame, windows dark as closed eyes, graffiti layering the brick facade like scar tissue. The kind of place where screams wouldn't carry and neighbors had learned not to ask questions. Stacy sat in the back of the Mercedes, her white uniform blouse torn at the shoulder and spotted with blood. Not hers, she didn't think, though the adrenaline made it hard to tell. Her hands had finally started shaking, a delayed reaction she couldn't suppress. She clasped them together in her lap, pressing hard enough that her knuckles went white. Across from her, Sungmin sat with his phone casting cold blue light across his face. He'd removed his suit jacket somewhere between the Lotus room and here, had rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows with methodical precision. She could see blood dried in the creases of his knuckles from where he dragged her through the service corridor. "Chen had 6 men total," he said, not looking up from his phone. "We killed 4. 2 escaped. They'll report back to whoever hired them, which means whoever wants me dead now knows you're with me." Stacy's stomach dropped. "I didn't ask to be with you." "No," he agreed, finally looking at her. "You asked to save my life. Unfortunately, that's the same thing." He leaned forward slightly, elbows on his knees. "The ricin delivery system. You said you helped design it. For whom?" She'd known this question was coming, had been dreading it since the moment she'd opened her mouth in that dining room. But lies would get her killed faster than truth. "Dr. Adrian Russo," she said quietly. "Vittorio family's research division. They recruited me out of Colombia, told me I'd be doing pharmaceutical research, developing transdermal drug delivery for medical applications. Pain management, hormone therapy, that kind of thing." "But they weren't interested in medicine," Sungmin said. "No, they were interested in assassination tools that looked like accidents." Stacy's fingers twisted together. "By the time I figured it out, I'd already helped create 3 different delivery systems. The pen was one. There was also a watch band and a business card with microscopic needles. And then you went to the FBI. And then I watched them test the pen on a low-level accountant who'd been skimming. The words came out flat, dead. They made me watch, said it was a lesson about loyalty. He signed a confession, and 90 seconds later he was seizing on the floor, dead in 3 minutes. Sungmin's expression didn't change, but something shifted in his eyes. Not softness, men like him didn't do soft, but recognition maybe. Understanding of what it meant to witness violence that couldn't be unseen. "So you testified," he said. "I testified. Gave them everything. Research notes, formulas, test subjects, financial records. The Vittorio Empire collapsed in 8 weeks. Federal seizures, indictments, the works." She met his gaze. "They put a $3 million bounty on me anyway. Said I was a traitor. Said accountants shouldn't think they can destroy families. The FBI gave you immunity. The FBI gave me a new identity and $50,000. Told me to disappear." Her laugh was bitter. "So I became a waitress. Because no one looks at waitresses. We're furniture, wallpaper, invisible." The car pulled up to the safe house. Sungmin's remaining guards, 3 men, all looking worse for wear, formed a perimeter as he guided her out of the vehicle and up the cracked steps. Inside, the air tasted like dust and old violence. Minimal furniture occupied the front room. A scarred table, mismatched chairs, a couch bleeding foam stuffing from knife wounds in its upholstery. A single bulb cast shadows that moved like living things. "Sit," Sungmin said, gesturing to one of the chairs. Stacy sat, watched as he moved to the far wall where a crooked painting of the Brooklyn Bridge hung. His fingers found the frame's edge and swung it aside to reveal a wall safe. The combination spun beneath his fingers with practiced ease. When he turned back, he held a manila envelope thick enough to choke on. $75,000, he said, placing it on the table between them. "Take it. Disappear. Change your name again. Leave the state. Forget tonight happened." Stacy stared at the envelope. She could see the edges of $100 bills through the paper, could imagine what 75,000 meant. First and last month's rent somewhere far away, a new identity. Enough cushion to start over properly, but she was tired of running. No, she said. Sungmin's eyebrows rose fractionally. No? Chen knew exactly where you'd be tonight, knew you'd be signing that contract, knew which seat you'd take, which pen you'd use. She leaned forward. That takes inside information. Someone in your organization told him. I'm aware, Sungmin said, his voice soft and dangerous. Then you know you can't trust your own people right now. You need someone from outside. Someone who understands poisons, delivery systems, assassination protocols. She held his gaze. Someone who's already dead so they have nothing left to lose. He studied her for a long moment. Then he pulled out his phone, swiped through several screens, and turned it to face her. Security camera footage. The Lotus Room. But not from tonight, from 3 weeks ago. Showing Chen meeting with someone else in that same private dining area. Showing them examining something small, a pen. I've suspected Chen for a month, Sungmin said. But I needed proof before I moved. I needed to know who else was involved, how deep the conspiracy went. He paused. I was going to sign with a dummy pen. Switch them at the last second. Let him think he'd succeeded. Then follow the money trail. Stacy's blood ran cold. But I grabbed your wrist. But you grabbed my wrist, he agreed. Saved my life before I could execute my own plan. Which means now Chen's partners know I'm aware of the plot. They'll accelerate, come at me faster, harder, from angles I haven't prepared for. So you need help. I need someone who can identify poisons on site, who understands assassination protocols, who's already survived one family's attempt to kill her. His eyes locked onto hers. I need the auditor who destroyed the Vittorios, not the waitress who's been hiding for 3 years. Stacy's heart hammered against her ribs. This was insane. This was a death sentence. This was everything she'd spent 3 years avoiding. But when Sungmin had covered her body with his on that marble floor, when his arms had wrapped around her head protectively while bullets flew, something had clicked into place. Something that felt like recognition. Like finding someone who understood that the world was fundamentally dangerous, and surviving it required becoming dangerous in return. What's the job? She asked. Find the mole in my organization. Identify who's working with Chen's partners. Trace the money, trace the contracts, trace every thread until we find who's really pulling the strings. He leaned back. You do that, and I'll give you something better than money. What's that? Protection. A name that means something. The kind of safety that comes from people being too afraid to touch you because of who you belong to. His smile was sharp. The Vittorios put a bounty on you because you were alone. But if you're mine, if you're under my protection, that bounty becomes a death sentence for anyone stupid enough to try collecting it. The offer hung in the air between them. Not salvation exactly. More like trading one kind of danger for another. But at least this danger came with teeth, with the ability to bite back. I have conditions, Stacy said. Name them. I don't kill. I'll help you find them, trace them, expose them, but I don't pull triggers. Agreed. My men handle the wet work. I need access to your financial records, all of them. Offshore accounts, shell corporations, everything. Sungmin's jaw tightened fractionally, but he nodded. You'll have it. And when this is over, when we found your mole and dealt with Chen's partners, I want out. Clean break. New identity that actually works this time. Somewhere they'll never find me. Deal, he said. Then he extended his hand across the table. Welcome to the losing side, Miss Monroe. Stacy took his hand. His grip was firm, warm, grounding. The coast is clear, she said, testing words that felt like a promise. What? Code phrase, for when the job's done, when it's safe. She squeezed his hand once. When we've survived. His expression softened almost imperceptibly. The coast is clear, he repeated. I'll remember. The mobile command center smelled like electronics and stale coffee, and the particular tension that preceded either violence or revelation. Banks of monitors lined the walls of the retrofitted surveillance van, each screen showing different angles of the city. Traffic cameras, security feeds, satellite imagery that absolutely shouldn't have been accessible to private citizens. Stacy sat at one of the terminals, her fingers flying across the keyboard, with the muscle memory of someone who'd spent years making numbers confess their secrets. Lines of code scrolled past, financial records, shell corporation registries, the digital architecture of an empire built on fear and carefully laundered money. Sun Min stood behind her, close enough that she could feel his presence like heat against her back. They'd been working for 16 hours straight. Her waitress uniform had been replaced by dark jeans and a black sweater that one of his men had procured. Her hair was pulled back in a tight ponytail that made her scalp ache. "There," she said, highlighting a series of transactions. 5 wire transfers over the past 3 months, all from your Singapore account to a shell corporation in the Caymans. Total of 2.3 million. "I didn't authorize those," Sun Min said, leaning closer to read the screen. His breath stirred the hair at her nape. "I know. The authorization codes are yours, but the timestamps are wrong. These transfers happened at 3 a.m. on a Tuesday, 1 a.m. on a Friday, 4 a.m. on a Sunday." She pulled up another screen. "According to your security logs, you were in 3 different cities on those dates: Tokyo, Seoul, and Vancouver. So someone cloned my credentials," he said. "Not just cloned, improved." Stacy's fingers danced across the keyboard. "They added a secondary authorization layer that bypasses your biometric security. Fingerprint and retinal scans aren't required if the transaction originates from a specific IP address." "Show me the IP." She pulled it up. The address resolved to a location that made Sun Min's entire body go rigid. "That's my brother's apartment," he said quietly. Stacy turned in her chair to face him. "You have a brother?" "Had a brother." His jaw was tight. "Taemin, younger by 4 years. He wanted nothing to do with the family business. Studied art history at Yale. Spent the last 8 years in Europe, Florence mostly. He paints." "When did he come back?" 6 weeks ago." Sun Min moved away from her, paced to the other side of the van. "Said he wanted to reconnect, that he was tired of running from the family name. I was." He paused. "I was happy. Thought maybe we could finally be brothers again instead of strangers." Stacy pulled up more records, her heart sinking with each new discovery. The Shell Corporation in the Caymans traces back to a consulting firm in Delaware. The consulting firm is owned by... She stopped. "Say it," Sun Min demanded. "Park Taemin," she finished quietly. "Your brother's name is on everything." The silence that followed had weight, physical presence. She could see Sun Min processing, calculating, feeling something that might have been grief colliding with the cold necessity of survival. "Pull up his travel records," he said finally, his voice absolutely flat. Stacy did. The records showed Taemin had returned to New York 6 weeks ago, yes, but the data also showed something else, something that made her stomach turn to ice. "He didn't come from Florence," she said. "He came from Singapore, same city where Chen supposedly operates from. And before that..." She traced the digital breadcrumbs. "He made 3 trips to Virginia over the past year. Langley, Virginia." "CIA headquarters," Sun Min said. "Your brother isn't just betraying you for money," Stacy said carefully. "He's working with the agency. They've been using him to map your entire organization. This isn't just about Chen. This is about dismantling your empire from the inside while looking like internal gang violence." She pulled up encrypted emails she'd recovered from a server she'd backtraced through 3 proxy layers. The messages were fragmented, coded, but clear enough in their intent. "They promised him immunity," she said, scanning the text. 20 million in cryptocurrency, new identity in Portugal. All he has to do is deliver you, alive or dead, and provide testimony about your operations." Sun Min's hand moved to the weapons locker mounted on the van's wall. His fingers closed around a handgun with the ease of a man who'd been holding weapons since before he could properly hold beliefs. "I'm going to kill him," he said quietly. "No." Stacy stood, positioning herself between him and the weapons. "You go in guns blazing, you die. They're expecting that. They want you emotional. They want you reckless." His eyes were black ice. "Get out of my way." "I memorized your routing numbers," she said. The words hit like a physical blow. Sun Min froze. Every offshore account, every shell corporation, every laundering pipeline, every number sequence required to access the fortune you've spent 15 years building. It's all in here. She tapped her temple. "You walk out that door on a suicide mission and I delete everything. I freeze your assets. I transfer your money to charity. I burn your empire before you can throw your life away." The silence stretched like razor wire. "You're blackmailing me," he said, his voice soft and dangerous. "I'm saving you," she corrected. "Because someone has to." He moved faster than she anticipated. One moment he was across the van, the next his hands were slamming into the wall on either side of her head, caging her in. The weapon was forgotten. His body was a wall of heat and barely restrained fury, pressing close enough that she could count his heartbeats through the fabric of his shirt. "Why?" The word came out ragged, raw. "Why do you care if I live or die? You could take that 75,000. You could disappear again. You could be nobody and safe and far away from this." Because she saw herself in his rage. Because she recognized the particular species of grief that came from watching loyalty weaponized against you. Because when he'd covered her body with his during the shooting, some fundamental truth had clicked into place, that men who protected others before themselves were rare enough to be worth saving. "Because you can't kill him if you're dead," she said instead. "But I can destroy them while you're still breathing." His eyes searched hers. This close, she could see flecks of gold in the darkness, could see the scar tissue at the corner of his left eye, where something, a blade, a bullet, had passed too close, could feel the heat radiating off him in waves that made the small space feel incendiary. "What's your plan?" he asked finally. "You handle the blood, I'll handle the money, but we do it together or we don't do it at all." For a long moment, he didn't move. His gaze dropped to her mouth, lingered there, then back to her eyes. The air between them felt charged, dangerous, like the moment before lightning struck. Then slowly, he pushed away from the wall. 48 hours, he said, moving back to the monitors. His voice had shifted into something calculating, controlled. "That's how long we have before Taman finalizes the exchange with the CIA. After that, he hands over my location, and I'm dead within 24 hours. Then we have 48 hours to make him wish he'd never been born," Stacy said, settling back into the chair. Her hands were shaking, so she placed them flat on the keyboard to still them. "Pull up his banking records, his phone logs, his credit card history. I need to see every pattern, every routine, every place he feels safe." Sunmin moved to stand beside her. Not behind her this time, but shoulder to shoulder. Equal partners. His hand brushed against hers on the keyboard, and neither of them pulled away. "One condition," he said quietly. "What?" "When this is over, you tell me the real reason you're helping me. The one you're not saying." Stacy's breath caught. She didn't look at him. Couldn't. "Deal," she whispered. They worked through the night, building a profile of betrayal. Every transaction Timon had made, every meeting he'd taken, every lie he'd constructed. The picture that emerged was meticulous, calculated, and utterly ruthless. By dawn, they had a plan. It would require Stacy to do something she'd sworn she'd never do again. Walk directly into the lion's den. Become the bait. Let herself be seen by the people hunting her. But this time, she wouldn't be alone. This time, she had a dragon at her back. The art gallery in Chelsea smelled like champagne and pretension, and the particular musk of wealth trying to prove its sophistication. Abstract paintings lined white walls, each piece accompanied by a placard explaining why splattered paint was worth more than most people made in a year. Stacy wore a black cocktail dress that one of Sung Min's men had somehow procured in her exact size. Her hair was down, straightened, falling past her shoulders in a way that made her look nothing like the waitress from the Lotus Room. Diamond earrings, borrowed, probably stolen, definitely expensive, caught the gallery's track lighting. She moved through the crowd with champagne flute in hand, playing the role of cultured art enthusiast, while her eyes tracked every exit, every security camera, every person who looked at her too long. Taemin Park stood near the center of the gallery, surrounded by admirers discussing his latest collection. At 34, he looked like a softer version of his brother. Same bone structure, same dark eyes, but lacking Sun Min's edge. Where Sun Min was sharp angles and controlled violence, Taemin was smooth curves and practiced charm. He wore a cream linen suit that screamed artist, and a smile that suggested he'd never known fear. That he'd spent his whole life being the younger brother, the spare, the one who didn't have to get his hands dirty. Stacy watched him laugh at something a silver-haired woman said, watched him touch her elbow with easy familiarity, watched him play the role of harmless creative while planning his brother's murder. Her earpiece crackled softly. Sunmin's voice barely audible. He just checked his phone. Text message from unknown number. He's moving toward the back gallery. 3 minutes. Stacy set down her champagne and drifted toward the rear of the space, where larger canvases dominated the walls. Abstract violence, all red slashes and black voids. Fitting. Taemin entered the back gallery 90 seconds later. Found her standing in front of his largest piece, a canvas that looked like a crime scene rendered in crimson and shadow. Interesting choice, he said, approaching with that easy smile. Most people prefer the earlier work. Less confrontational. I like confrontational, Stacy said, turning to face him. It's honest. He studied her with an artist's eye, taking in the dress, the earrings, the way she held herself. I don't think we've met. I'm Taemin Park. Stacy Monroe, she said, extending her hand. His expression didn't change, but she saw it. The fractional widening of his pupils. The slight tension in his shoulders. He knew the name. Had probably seen her photo in whatever dossier the CIA had compiled. Monroe. He repeated, taking her hand. His grip was firm, dry. Any relation to the famous forensic chemist? I am the famous forensic chemist, she said. Or I was, before I became a ghost. Taemin's smile tightened fractionally. Fascinating. And what brings a ghost to my gallery opening? Research, Stacy said. I'm writing a book about family loyalty, how it shapes us, how it breaks us, how some people value it above everything else while others— She gestured at the violent canvas. Well, others paint it in blood and call it art. His hand dropped from hers. That's quite philosophical for a Tuesday night. Your brother sent me, Stacy said quietly, watching his face. The mask cracked, just for a second, just long enough for her to see the calculation underneath, the rapid assessment of threat and opportunity. I don't know what you're talking about, he said. Yes, you do. Sunmin knows about the wire transfers, knows about your trips to Langley, knows about the deal you made with Chen. She stepped closer, dropping her voice. He knows you're selling him to the CIA for $20 million and a villa in Portugal. Taemin's jaw tightened. His eyes darted around the gallery, looking for exits, for backup, for any advantage. If my brother knows, why send you? Why not come himself? Because he wanted to give you a choice, Stacy lied smoothly. Turn yourself in now, confess to the family, he'll make it quick, or— She paused. Keep running, keep planning, and when he finds you, and he will find you, it won't be quick at all. He can't touch me, Taemin said, but there was uncertainty in his voice now. I have protection, people watching me. If anything happens to me, everything I know goes public. That's what I told the Vittorios, Stacy said. Right before I destroyed them. Dead man's switches only work if the people pulling the trigger care about the consequences. She smiled. Your brother doesn't. Taemin pulled out his phone with shaking hands. Started to dial. I wouldn't, Stacy said. The moment you make that call, he'll know where you are. Right now, you still have maybe 6 hours before his people triangulate your location, but you call your CIA handlers and they'll trace the signal. Game over. His finger hovered over the screen. He sent me to offer you a deal, Stacy continued. One-time offer. You tell us everything. Who else is involved, how deep the conspiracy goes, what the endgame is. You do that, and he'll let you disappear. Real disappearance, not witness protection. Actually gone. Why would he do that? Taemin asked. Why would he let me live? Because you're his brother, Stacy said softly. And despite everything you've done, despite the fact that you're trying to kill him, he still remembers when you were kids, before the violence, before the empire, when you were just brothers. It was a lie. Sunmin had no intention of letting Taemin live, but the lie worked. She saw it in the way Taemin's shoulders sagged, in the way his grip loosened on the phone, in the desperate hope that flickered across his face. Where? He asked. There's a car outside, black Mercedes. My associate is waiting. She touched his elbow gently. Come with me now, tell us everything, and this nightmare ends. Taemin looked at her, really looked at her, searching for deception. But Stacy had learned from the best, had spent 3 years being invisible, had mastered the art of showing people exactly what they wanted to see. Okay, he said finally. Okay, but I want immunity in writing. I want— You'll get everything promised, Stacy interrupted. Just come with me. They walked through the gallery together, past the admirers and the champagne and the art that pretended to understand violence. Walked out into the Chelsea night that smelled like rain and car exhaust and the particular electricity of a city that never slept. The Mercedes was waiting at the curb. Sung Min sat in the back seat. Tae-min froze on the sidewalk when he saw his brother through the tinted window. Turned to run. But Sung Min's men were already there. 3 of them, appearing from doorways and parked cars with the coordination of practice. "No," Tae-min said, backing away. "No, you promised." "I promised nothing," Stacy said quietly. "Your brother, on the other hand, promises you'll have time to explain yourself before he decides whether you live or die." They pushed him into the car, not gently. Sung Min sat absolutely still as his brother scrambled away from him, pressing against the far door like a cornered animal. "Hyung," Tae-min started, his voice breaking. "Please, I can explain." "Explain in the car," Sung Min said. His voice was empty. "Dead. We have a long drive ahead of us." Stacy slid in beside Sung Min. The door closed with the solid thunk of German engineering. The vehicle pulled away from the curb, merging into traffic, heading toward Queens and the real safe house and the reckoning that had been building for 6 weeks. "You lied to me," Tae-min said to Stacy, realization dawning. "There's no deal. No immunity." "No," she agreed. "There isn't. But I'm his brother." "You were his brother," Sung Min corrected softly. "Past tense. The moment you took CIA money, the moment you agreed to sell me, you stopped being family and became just another problem that needs solving." Tae-min started crying. Messy, ugly tears that tracked down his face and made him look younger than his 34 years. "I didn't want to," he sobbed. "They had evidence. They threatened to prosecute me for money laundering. I'd go to prison for 20 years. I just wanted." "You wanted the easy way out," Sung Min said. "You always did." The car drove through the city, heading toward judgment, and Stacy sat beside a man deciding whether to kill his own brother while feeling absolutely nothing except the cold satisfaction of a trap sprung perfectly. The warehouse in Queens smelled like rust and old motor oil, and the particular weight of spaces where bad things had happened and no one had bothered to clean up the evidence. A single overhead light swung slightly on its chain, casting shadows that moved like living things across concrete floors stained with substances. Stacy didn't want to identify. Tae-min sat in a metal chair in the center of the space, his hands zip-tied behind his back. His cream linen suit now rumpled and stained with sweat. His face was bruised, not from beating, but from where he'd tried to throw himself out of the moving Mercedes, and one of Sung Min's men had dragged him back inside with more force than necessary. Sung Min stood 10 feet away, absolutely still in that way that suggested violence held in suspension. He'd removed his jacket, rolled his shirt sleeves to his elbows with methodical precision. The single overhead bulb cast harsh shadows across his face, turning him into something carved from obsidian in controlled fury. Stacy leaned against the far wall, her arms wrapped around herself despite the warehouse's stale warmth. She'd seen interrogations before, had been present for several during her time testifying against the Vittorios. But this felt different, more intimate, more terrible. Because this wasn't business, this was family eating itself alive. "Start talking," Sung Min said quietly. "Who approached you first?" Tae-min's head hung low, his shoulders shaking with either sobs or terror. "CIA. CIA," he whispered. "Agent named Marcus Webb, 8 months ago. He showed up at my apartment in Florence with photos of me at a gallery opening where I'd sold 3 paintings to known criminals. Said I was complicit in money laundering. Said I could either cooperate or spend 20 years in federal prison." "What did they want?" "Information. About you. About the organization. Shipping routes, money flows, names of associates." Tae-min's voice was ragged. "I told them I didn't know anything, that I'd been out of the family business for years, but they didn't believe me. Said blood was blood. Said you'd trust me if I came home." "So you came home," Sung Min said. No emotion, just statement of fact. "I didn't have a choice." Tae-min's head snapped up, desperation bleeding from every word. "They threatened to kill me. Said if I didn't cooperate, they'd make it look like gang violence, like you'd ordered it. They'd frame you for murdering your own brother. But instead, you decided to actually help them murder me." Sung Min said softly. "Much better plan." I never wanted you dead, Taemin said, tears streaming down his face. I swear to God, Hyun, I never wanted that. I was just supposed to gather information, report your movements, help them build a case. Then why the poisoned pen? Stacy asked from her position against the wall. Why work with Chen to kill him at the contract signing? Taemin's eyes found hers, pleading. That wasn't me. I swear that wasn't me. Chen approached me separately, said he was interested in investing in my art. We had coffee 3 times before he mentioned he knew about my arrangement with the CIA. And? Sungmin prompted. And he said he had a better offer. 20 million in cryptocurrency, new identity. He'd make me disappear better than the CIA ever could. All I had to do was provide one piece of information. Where you'd be, when you'd be there, who you'd be with. The contract signing, Sungmin said. Yes, I told him about the meeting with Chen. Told him you'd be in the Lotus Room private dining area. I didn't know. His voice broke. I swear I didn't know he was going to try to kill you. I thought he just wanted to surveil you. Maybe steal something. I didn't know about the pen. Stacy pushed off the wall, moved closer. But you knew something was wrong. You must have suspected. Taemin's head dropped again. I suspected, he admitted quietly. But by then I was in too deep. Chen said if I backed out, he'd tell you everything. Tell you I'd betrayed you, and I knew what you'd do. What would I do? Sungmin asked, his voice dangerously soft. Kill me, Taemin whispered. You'd kill me just like you killed father's other enemies, just like you killed anyone who threatened the family. I was terrified, so I kept quiet, kept feeding them information, kept hoping somehow it would all just go away. The silence that followed had weight. Stacy could see Sungmin processing, calculating, feeling something that might have been grief colliding with the cold mathematics of survival. The CIA, Sungmin said finally. Give me names, all of them. Marcus Webb is the lead agent. There are 3 others, Jennifer Park, no relation, she's Korean-American translator. David Chen, he's the money guy, handles all the financial tracking. And Thomas Brennan, he's the muscle. Former Marine, scary as hell. Where do they operate from? A field office in Midtown, 32nd floor of the Chrysler Building. It's not official CIA space. It's rented under a shell corporation, but that's where they run the operation. Sungmin glanced at Stacy. She nodded, already calculating. The Chrysler Building, high security, multiple exits, but also public, which meant collateral damage if things went wrong. What's their endgame? Stacy asked Taemin. They want to use you to get to the bigger families, Taemin said. You're not the target. You're the key. They think if they can flip you, get you to testify about your relationships with the triads, the Yakuza, the Russian syndicate, they can bring down organized crime across the entire eastern seaboard. And if I don't flip? Sungmin asked. Then they kill you and blame it on gang violence. Either way, they get what they want. Disruption of the power structure, justification for increased budgets, expanded authority. Sungmin's jaw tightened. When's the exchange supposed to happen? Tomorrow night. 32nd floor of the Chrysler Building, 8 p.m. I'm supposed to bring documentation, financial records, shipping manifests, everything I've gathered. They give me the cryptocurrency wallet codes, I disappear. And my location? Sungmin pressed. I was supposed to tell them tonight, after the gallery opening. Call a number, give them your current safe house address. Taemin's eyes were desperate. But I didn't. I swear I didn't call them. I was going to, but then He gestured at Stacy with his chin, showed up and everything went wrong. Stacy moved to stand beside Sungmin, close enough to feel the tension radiating from his body. He's telling the truth? She said quietly. I've been monitoring his phone. No outgoing calls since we grabbed him. Sungmin's hand moved to the weapon holstered beneath his arm. His fingers rested on the grip, not drawing it, just touching it. A reminder that he could. That the space between intention and execution was measured in fractions of seconds. Hyun, please, Taemin said, his voice breaking completely. I know I don't deserve mercy. I know what I've done. But I'm your brother. I'm blood. That has to mean something. You're right, Sungmin said quietly. It does mean something. He drew the weapon. Not fast, not slow. Just smooth, practiced, inevitable. Taemin's eyes went wide. No, please. It means, Sungmin continued, that instead of killing you right now, I'm going to give you a choice. His finger rested on the trigger, the barrel pointed at his brother's head. Tomorrow night, you go to that meeting in the Chrysler building. You give them everything they asked for. Financial records, shipping manifests, all of it. What? Taemin's confusion was genuine. Except the records will be fake, Stacy said, understanding flooding through her. Doctored financials that lead them in circles. False shipping routes. Bad intelligence. Exactly, Sunmin said. You'll wear a wire. You'll record everything they say. Every admission, every illegal order, every crime they've committed while pretending to be legitimate law enforcement. And then? Taemin asked. And then we expose them, Stacy said. We send the recordings to every news organization in the country. We prove that the CIA has been running unsanctioned operations on U.S. soil. We destroy their careers the same way they tried to destroy your brother's empire. Sunmin lowered the weapon slightly. You do this, you help us burn them, and I'll let you walk away. Real disappearance. Money enough to start over. You'll never see me again, and I'll never come looking for you. But if you run, Stacy added, if you warn them, if you betray him one more time, I'll find you. I'll freeze every account you have. I'll expose every crime you've ever committed, and then I'll give your location to every family your brother has ever crossed. They'll spend years making you wish you died here tonight. Taemin stared at them both, at his brother holding a gun, at the woman who'd somehow become his brother's partner, at the impossible choice between certain death and possible redemption. Okay, he whispered finally. Okay, I'll do it. I'll wear the wire. I'll give them fake intelligence. I'll help you. Sungmin holstered his weapon. Cut him loose, he told his men. As the zip ties came off, Taemin rubbed his wrists, his eyes never leaving his brother's face. Why? He asked. Why give me this chance? Sunmin's expression was unreadable. Because somewhere under all the betrayal and fear, you're still the brother who used to paint pictures for me when father was angry. The brother who hid me in his closet when I was 8 and mother was drunk. That brother deserves one chance. Just one, Stacy emphasized. Just one, Sunmin agreed. 24 hours until the exchange. 24 hours to prepare false documents, to wire Taemin properly, to plan for every contingency. 24 hours until they either destroyed the people hunting them or died trying. The Chrysler building's 32nd floor smelled like filtered air, and the particular sterility of spaces designed to witness transactions that would ruin lives. Floor-to-ceiling glass walls revealed Manhattan spread below like a circuit board. Lights flickering in patterns that suggested commerce and life, and all the mundane activities that continued whether empires burned or not. Stacy stood in an empty office 3 floors down, watching the exchange through a tablet connected to the wire Taemin wore beneath his shirt. The audio was crystal clear. The video, captured by a button camera, showed 4 people sitting around a conference table. Marcus Webb sat at the head. Mid-50s, gray hair, the kind of face that suggested he'd spent his career making difficult decisions and sleeping fine afterward. To his left, Jennifer Park, the translator, young and nervous, fingers drumming on the table. David Chen, the money man, next to her, reviewing documents with the dead-eyed focus of an accountant. And Thomas Brennan, the muscle, standing by the door with his arms crossed and a gun bulge visible beneath his jacket. Sunmin stood beside Stacy, watching the screen with absolute focus. His own men were positioned throughout the building, 4 in the stairwells, 3 in the parking garage, 2 in the lobby. Ready for violence if it came to that. Mr. Park, Webb said, his voice warm and congratulatory. I'm glad you could make it. I trust you have everything we discussed. Taemin's hands shook slightly as he placed a USB drive on the table. Everything. Financial records for the past 5 years, shipping manifests, names of every major player in my brother's organization. Webb picked up the drive, examined it like it was a holy relic. And your brother's current location? Queens, Industrial District, warehouse on 43rd Street. The address Taemin gave was an abandoned building. Empty. Safe. He's been using it as a safe house for 3 days. Excellent, Webb said, passing the drive to Chen. David, verify the contents. Chen plugged the drive into his laptop. His fingers flew across the keyboard. Stacy held her breath, waiting for him to recognize that the data was fake, that the numbers didn't add up, that the whole thing was a carefully constructed lie. But Chen nodded after 2 minutes of review. Looks legitimate. Cross-references with known transactions. Shell corporations match. This is good intel. Stacy exhaled slowly. The false documents had worked. The forensic accounting had been perfect, showing just enough truth mixed with fiction that it passed cursory inspection. But deep analysis would reveal the fraud. They had maybe 6 hours before the CIA realized they'd been played. Now, Taemin said, his voice steadier now, emboldened by the fact that they'd bought the fake data. My payment, 20 million, cryptocurrency wallet codes. That was the deal. About that, Webb said, and something in his tone made Stacy's blood run cold. What? Taemin asked. The deal has changed. Webb leaned back in his chair, fingers steepled. You see, Mr. Park, we've been doing this long enough to recognize a trap when we see one. I don't know what you're talking about. The data is good, Webb interrupted. Probably real, but you're wired. We've been scanning for electronic signals since you walked in. Found the transmitter 30 seconds ago. On the tablet screen, Stacy watched Thomas Brennan move from the door toward Taemin with frightening speed. Run, Sunmin said into his comms unit, voice sharp and urgent. Taemin, run now. But Brennan was already there. His hand closed around Taemin's collar, yanking him up from the chair. The button camera showed ceiling, then floor, then Brennan's face as he ripped the wire from Taemin's chest. Who sent you? Webb demanded. Your brother? The woman? Both? I don't. Please, I can explain. Brennan hit him, once, hard. The sound was meaty, brutal. Taemin's face snapped to the side. We're going in, Sunmin said to his men, already moving toward the door. Wait, Stacy grabbed his arm. They want you to come in. This is the trap. They're using Taemin to draw you out. He's my brother. He's bait, Stacy said urgently. And if you run in there, they'll kill you both and claim self-defense. We need another play. On the screen, Webb was speaking into his phone. Target is likely in the building. Initiate lockdown. All exits sealed. I want him found in the next 5 minutes. Sunmin's jaw tightened, but he nodded. What's the play? Stacy's mind raced through options. They couldn't fight their way out. Too many agents, too much firepower. They couldn't disappear. The building was going into lockdown. They needed leverage. Something that made killing them more dangerous than letting them go. The recordings, she said suddenly. The wire captured everything. Webb admitting to unsanctioned operations. Brennan assaulting a civilian. Chen acknowledging fake identities and shell corporations. So we don't threaten to release it later. We release it now. Live stream. Every news organization in the city. Let the world watch in real time as the CIA beats a confession out of a civilian on U.S. soil. Sunmin's expression shifted. Do it. Stacy's fingers flew across the tablet. She isolated the audio feed, stripped Taemin's wire signal, and rerouted it through 3 news organizations' tip lines. Then she went further, uploaded the video feed to a live streaming platform, sent links to 50 different news desks, and added a caption. CIA tortures civilian in Chrysler Building, happening now, 32nd floor. Within 90 seconds, the view count started climbing. 100 viewers, 500, 2,000. Her phone rang. Unknown number, she answered. Webb's voice, very clever, Miss Monroe, but you've just made this worse. Now I have no choice but to eliminate all witnesses. Wrong, Stacy said. Now you have 50,000 witnesses. That number is doubling every minute. You kill us, it's live-streamed murder. You let us go, maybe you survive the investigation. You're bluffing. Check Twitter, Stacy said. Hashtag Chrysler Building. Hashtag CIA corruption. You're trending. Silence on the line. Then Webb's voice, tight with barely controlled fury. What do you want? Safe passage. Your word that you'll let us walk out of this building unharmed. And if I refuse, then I have 6 more recordings uploaded to Deadman's switches. If I don't input a code in the next 20 minutes, everything goes public. Every crime you've committed, every illegal operation, every bribe, every threat, every body. Your entire career burns. More silence. Then, fine, you have 10 minutes to clear the building. After that, all bets are off. The line went dead. Sunmin was already moving, his men falling into formation around them. They took the stairs. Elevators were death traps in situations like this. Stacy's legs burned as they descended 32 floors at a run, her dress shoes slipping on concrete, Sunmin's hand on her elbow keeping her steady. They burst into the lobby to find NYPD assembling outside. News vans, satellite trucks. The live stream had worked too well. Now there were actual authorities responding. "This way," one of Sung Min's men said, directing them toward a service exit. They emerged into an alley that smelled like garbage and rain. A Mercedes waited with engine running. "Tae-min?" Sung Min asked, looking back at the building. "Still inside," Stacy said quietly. "Webb won't kill him now. Too many witnesses. He'll be arrested probably, charged with conspiracy." "So we left him." "We left him alive," Stacy corrected, "which is more than he deserved." Sung Min looked at her for a long moment, then he nodded and climbed into the Mercedes. As they pulled away from the Chrysler building, Stacy watched through the rear window as more police arrived, as news crews set up cameras. As the story exploded across social media in real time, they'd survived. Barely. But they'd exposed the operation, burned the agents, and lived to tell about it. The coast wasn't clear yet, but for the first time in 3 years, Stacy could see the horizon. 3 years later, Seoul was blooming. Spring rain had given way to cherry blossoms that drifted through the air like snow, collecting in doorways and against windshields, turning the city into something almost magical, almost clean, almost capable of erasing the blood that had brought them here. Stacy stood in front of floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the Han River, her reflection sharp against the afternoon skyline. The apartment was modern minimalism, all clean lines and carefully chosen art, expensive but not ostentatious. The kind of place where a legitimate businessman and his wife would live, where a financial consultant and her husband would build a life that had nothing to do with dead men or empires or the weight of choices that could never be unmade. Behind her, she heard the apartment door open, small footsteps, a child's laughter, high-pitched and delighted and pure. "Uma!" The voice was Korean, perfect pronunciation despite being only 4 years old. "Appa bought me hatuk." Stacy turned to see Minji racing across the hardwood floor, dark hair and pigtails, her father's eyes and her mother's smile. She wore a pink dress with white flowers, and her hands were sticky with honey from the street pancakes Sung Min had apparently been unable to resist buying. "Did he now?" Stacy crouched down, catching the little girl in her arms. "And did you share with him, or did you eat them all yourself?" "I shared," Minji said indignantly. "Appa had 2, I had 3. "That sounds fair," Stacy said, fighting a smile. Sung Min entered behind their daughter, carrying grocery bags and wearing jeans and a casual button-down that made him look nothing like the man who'd once ruled an empire with blood and fear. His hair was shorter now, styled differently. He wore glasses, clear lenses, purely aesthetic, but they changed his face enough that casual observers wouldn't recognize him. Park Sung-min was dead, had died 3 years ago in a warehouse fire in Queens, according to official records. The man living in Seoul now was Kang Jae-sung, mid-level executive at a legitimate shipping company, husband to financial consultant Sarah Kang, father to one precocious 4-year-old who was currently explaining in great detail why she needed a puppy. "No puppies," Sung-min said, setting the groceries on the kitchen counter. "We discussed this." "But Appa." "Fish," he countered. "You can have a fish, colorful fish, many fish if you want." Minji considered this. "Rainbow fish?" "Rainbow fish," he agreed. Stacy watched the negotiation with warmth spreading through her chest. This was what they'd fought for. This impossible, ordinary life where the most pressing crisis was whether their daughter could have a pet. After they'd escaped the Chrysler building 3 years ago, everything had moved fast. The live-streamed recordings had destroyed Webb's career. The Justice Department had launched an investigation into unsanctioned CIA operations. 3 agents had been arrested. Webb himself had vanished, probably into witness protection, probably selling out everyone he'd ever worked with to avoid prison. Tae-min had been arrested, yes, had faced charges. But with Sung-min dead and the organization collapsed, the prosecutors had accepted a plea deal. 5 years probation, testimony against the corrupt agents, and a permanent exile from New York. Last Stacy heard, he was in Portland, teaching art at a community college under an assumed name. Sung-min had orchestrated his own death carefully. A warehouse fire, body burned beyond recognition, actually a homeless man who died of natural causes, purchased from a corrupt mortician. Dental records swapped. DNA samples contaminated. The kind of death that closed cases because everyone involved wanted it closed, and then they disappeared. Used the money Stacy had secured from his offshore accounts, $127 million, carefully laundered through 17 different jurisdictions, to start over, to become the people they'd pretended to be. "Dinner at 6, Sungmin said, unpacking vegetables. "I'm making kimchi jjigae, your mother's recipe," he added to Minji. "A spicy one?" the little girl asked hopefully. "The mild one," Stacy corrected. "You're 4. You can handle spicy when you're 14. Minji pouted but didn't argue. She'd learned early that when Uma used that tone, negotiation was futile. After dinner, after Minji was bathed and storied and tucked into bed with her collection of stuffed animals, Stacy and Sungmin sat on the balcony overlooking the river. The city lights reflected off the water in shimmers of gold and silver. The air smelled like spring and possibility. "She asked about my scars today," Sungmin said quietly, staring at the river. "The ones on my back. Wanted to know how I got them." "What did you tell her?" "That I was in an accident when I was young. That sometimes bad things happen, but they make us stronger." He paused. "I don't want her to ever know what I was. What I did." "She won't," Stacy said, taking his hand. "As far as she knows, you're just her appa who makes terrible dad jokes and buys her too many hotteok." "I do terrible dad jokes," he admitted. "Awful," she agreed. They sat in comfortable silence for a moment. 3 years together, and silence still felt like peace instead of tension, like trust instead of uncertainty. "Do you miss it?" Sungmin asked suddenly. "The auditing, the investigation work, the adrenaline." Stacy considered the question. Did she miss the thrill of tracing money through impossible labyrinths? Miss the satisfaction of exposing corruption? Miss the feeling of being sharp and dangerous and feared? "Sometimes," she admitted. "But then I come home and Minji shows me her drawings from school, and I remember that being nobody is the greatest gift I've ever received." "You're not nobody," Sungmin said, squeezing her hand. "You're the woman who saved my life, who destroyed my enemies, who gave me a reason to want to survive instead of just surviving." "Sweet talker," she murmured. "I learned from the best," he said. Another comfortable silence. Then Sungmin said, "I had a nightmare last night. That Wei found us. That he figured out I wasn't really dead." Marcus Webb, the former CIA agent who'd vanished 3 years ago. Stacy had spent considerable resources tracking him, had confirmed he was in witness protection in Montana under a new identity, working as a community college security guard, his career destroyed and his life reduced to barely scraping by. "He didn't," she said firmly. "And even if he did, he has no power anymore. No resources, no authority. He's nobody now. Just like us." "Just like us," Sungmin echoed. The balcony door slid open. Minji stood there in her pajamas, clutching her favorite stuffed rabbit. "Can't sleep," she said. "Bad dream." "Come here, little one," Sungmin said, lifting her onto his lap. "Tell Appa about it." "Dreamed you went away," Minji said softly, burying her face in his shoulder. "That you didn't come home." Stacy's throat tightened. Even children understood loss. Even at 4, Minji sensed that the world was dangerous, that people could vanish, that nothing was permanent. "I'm not going anywhere," Sungmin promised, his arms tight around their daughter. "I'm right here. Always right here. Promise?" Minji's voice was muffled against his shirt. "Promise," he said. Then he looked at Stacy. "The coast is clear. We're safe. We made it." Those words, their code phrase, the promise they'd made 3 years ago that had seemed impossible then and miraculous now. "The coast is clear," Stacy repeated softly. They sat together on the balcony, the 3 of them, watching Seoul's lights shimmer on the water, watching the city breathe and move and live without knowing or caring about the dragon who'd walked away from his empire or the auditor who'd burned one dynasty to build another. Inside the apartment, Stacy's phone buzzed, a news alert. She glanced at it reflexively. Former CIA agent Marcus Webb found dead in Montana, apparent suicide. She showed Sungmin the screen. He read it without expression. Then he deleted the alert. "The coast is clear," he said again. And this time it was true. No more threats, no more hunters, no more looking over their shoulder. Just a family on a balcony in Seoul, counting cherry blossoms and dreaming of rainbow fish and believing, finally, that tomorrow might be safe. Minji fell asleep in her father's arms. They carried her back to bed together, tucked her in, and stood in the doorway watching her breathe. "Thank you," Sungmin whispered. "For what?" "For grabbing my wrist that night, for seeing the poison." For choosing to save me instead of running. Stacy leaned her head on his shoulder. You would have done the same. Yes, he agreed. I would have. They closed Minji's door softly and returned to the balcony, to the lights and the river and the impossible ordinary life they'd built from the ashes of who they used to be. The coast was clear, finally, completely, forever. They were home.